Foxy.
Well, good afternoon, Tam. The kids are home from school today, so I've been doing a little bit of juggling with work and mom.
I love how you say the kids. It's like, I have 4 kids and it's so stressful.
Well, I'm including David in that too.
Oh, okay. Don't you hate it when people like me? Because I used to hate it when I had 1 kid, and like someone always be like, well, wait till you have 2 kids, or wait till you have 3 kids, or wait till you have 4 kids. I'm like, dude, I have 1 kid and that's effing just as hard as any other kid. And now I have 2, and I'm like, wait till you have 2 kids. Like, I hate myself.
You know what? Okay, totally get it. And yes, I do have that reaction because I'm a onesie, but in some ways I kind of think having 1 is super tricky because you have to be kind of like the playmate, the parent. You have to like keep
that
them
is
occupied,
true.
Right?
We can just throw out 2 in a room and just be like, play together, shut the door.
And I think we have done that.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I do that all the time with my 2. It's just like, ah. And then I'm thinking like, we're on this precipice of like, do we have a third, and I've heard that a third is either the best decision you'll ever make, or it's just a complete nightmare. And people say, I wish I had my life back when I only had 2. So I don't know, like my husband's exhausted. He's done. I'm like, well, I've got a little bit of like amnesia when it comes to like the actual birthing process, the first year, hating everything and everyone and postpartum depression and anxiety. I'm like, yeah, that'll be fine. So I don't know. I think next year will be D year, meaning like, it'll be the last time I'm going to consider it, and then we move on.
Oh, so that's going to be the end. You're just going to move on from there. Okay. Yeah. So if it doesn't happen next year, you think it won't happen? The third.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't even started trying, but if we try and it doesn't happen, we're done. I mean, and then I'll be like 42 and get pregnant. So
totally. Or like 49,
Yeah.
Like
might as well
be a major oops.
Yeah. Please no. Well, our next guest is not in the birthing category at all, although she kind of is, like birthing a future.
Yes.
See what I did there?
Mm-hmm. I like
birthing a future. And last night we have not had a money expert on this show in 120 episodes now. We've had sex experts and sleeping experts and parenting experts and relationship experts. I'm like, Roxy, we need a money expert. We need to learn how to save our money. Although I think you're pretty good with money. So it'll be interesting to see through this podcast, like how you feel about money and your relationship with money.
Yes, because we've been working on this. We've been talking about this on the podcast, all about our manifesting and everything. And I'm now turning into a believer when it comes to money.
I'm telling you.
Turning into a believer.
Believe, behave, become.
Yes, girl, the 3 B's.
You and I yesterday were like manifesting. Mm-hmm. Both of us were like, we're going to make money. We're going to make money. We're going to make money. And both of us yesterday made money.
Yeah. We both woke up with deals. Like it's weird. And me, I'm not woo-woo, but I do.
It's not woo-woo. It's called the universe. It's called law of attraction, and it's based in science.
Okay, girl, woo-woo.
She's like, it's so woo-woo. I'm like, then everything's woo-woo. Then God's woo-woo. Then it literally like everything is woo-woo.
Well, all I'm saying is I am ready for more woo-woo. So
yeah, you're ready for more money. So we have a millennial money expert, which is exactly what we need on this show. Tonya Rapley. I am so freaking excited to talk to her, and she's going to make us save and make more money. So welcome, Tonya.
Yeah, Tonya.
I hope so. Those are good promises.
Pressure.
Yes,
yeah, just a little.
Lots of pressure. Well, we are so excited to have you here on the show.
Yes.
So we have so many money questions. I feel like we should just like dive right in.
Do it.
Right. So I know you speak to a broad, audience, but a lot of your listeners and your audience is female, much like ours. Mm-hmm. So I think the whole relationship with women and money is so interesting, because I think we as women are taught, okay, if you go for money or you use that as your goal, or you really go after it, you're considered greedy, or you should just be like a little more standoffish when it comes to money. You shouldn't step into your power and make your deals and demand money. So can you speak to that? Like women's relationships with money? How do we better our relationship?
Right.
Well, I think first off, we have to throw that whole like women and money don't get along belief out the window. We are managing money and experiencing and making money very differently than like our grandparents and even some of our mothers. Like I know so many women who are just badasses at like making money and doing amazing things. So we have to like realize that things are different. Women are leading a lot of households. Women are becoming breadwinners. And with that comes, I think, a different responsibility. So it comes in, like we talk about, we're speaking about law of attraction and everything else. So it comes into like, okay, what do you really want? Do you want to be like financially independent where it doesn't matter who your partner is, you're going to be okay and secure financially? Because if you do, that's okay. And what do we do to get you there? So I think that that's really important for women to recognize. We always say as a financial educator, you have to assess where you are and where you want to be. And I think declaring what you want for yourself financially is that first step to be like, you know what, this is what I saw growing up, but this isn't what I want for myself. And it's okay that I don't want that, and nothing's wrong with them. I just want to do something completely different because that's what I want for myself. I think that sometimes we feel guilty about not wanting to, especially as women, about not wanting to play into a narrative that our parents or our grandparents have established for us and say like, no, that doesn't work for me. I'm good. I want to do something different. So I think women need to give themselves permission for that if they haven't already. But I'm also mindful of like, women are giving themselves permission. Like they don't need it from me. They're doing it. So I think that is like the first step in really working on your relationship with money. It's just getting clear on how you want it to operate within your life.
I was a child actor, so I made money really young, and my parents were good about it. They definitely saved my money, and I was able to buy property when I was 18 years old, which isn't, everyone's experience, obviously. But then kind of as I grew into my 20s, I then had my own responsibility with my own money. My parents were obviously there in the background that would help me out. But I just spent so much in my 20s, whether it was vacations or the next, I even bought like Dolce shoes and handbags because you see other people and it's all about like having things that you don't need to impress people that you don't even think you like. And I wasted, I think so what do you tell people who are in their 20s that some strategies that they can have about saving money, because you don't think about that when you're in your 20s. It's just about, well, at least I didn't. It was just way more about fun for me. And then you have kids and then you're like, oh crap, I wish I had saved the way that I could have.
Okay. So Tammin, let me ask you this. All right. So did you feel like you had the education or the information in your 20s you have now?
I had my parents, thank goodness, who were like, okay, you need to save. But that's all kind of I heard, which is like, you need to save and we'll help you with your health, like learning about healthcare and getting, stuff like that. But I didn't know anything about credit score. I didn't know anything about investing. I didn't know anything about debt. So I had a business manager as a kid, and then they kind of did everything. And then when the business manager left, because I was like, I'm going to do this myself, I was like, oh my goodness, I have no idea.
Yeah. And, so the reason I ask you that question is when we think about, a lot of people, when they get into their 30s, they shame themselves for decisions they made in their 20s. And as a financial educator, I have found that shame is not a motivator for a lot of people. Shame actually, and people make poorer financial decisions from a place of shame than they actually do from a position of empowerment. And so like the 20s, they happen, like you lived your life, you have those memories. And one of the things that I'm mindful of now, 2020, when we were all locked down, I was really sitting there with my memories from my 20s and everything like, man, I'm so glad I traveled and did those things because what if the world doesn't open back up the way it was? Or like, now, you know what? I'm stuck on my couch, but I'm gonna think about that trip I took to Africa, and I'm gonna revel in that. And so I think that for a lot of people, if we did have those experiences in our 20s, it served a purpose to an extent.
Right.
It served a space for exploration, but now we're in our 30s or beyond. And now it's time to make better decisions because now we know better. I don't shame anyone for not doing better when they didn't know any better. And I won't shame you even if you know better. But it's like, okay, now it's game time because this is what we have. This is what we're dealing with. So let's focus on where we are and what we're dealing with. If we can play catch up, then let's play catch up. The great thing I think, when we're in our 20s, right? We think about like, by the time I'm 30, I'm going to have it all together. And then we get to our 30s.
House
like,
and the kids, and you're like, holy crap.
Right. And then you get to 30, you're like, wait a minute. Okay, by 40, give me 40.
Yeah.
And then by 40, you're probably like, when I hit 50, that's it.
That's it. That's like, yeah.
So it reminds us like there's time, there's options at each stage. Yes, they're like being in your 20s, like that is valuable time that you could use to really get a leg up and really kickstart things. That doesn't mean that in your 30s you can't. And so when I'm working with my clients, like, what can we do based on where we are? Like, how do we catch up? Do we need to bring in more money? Do we need to negotiate so that you have more money to work and more discretionary income? How are we using this money now? Like, we shouldn't be using this money like we did in our 20s. We need to make sure we're putting it aside. What type of investments make sense for us to catch up, or that can kind of cover some of that ground that we might have missed. But for anybody who's listening and they're in their 30s and they feel like the money wagon has passed them, the money wagon has not passed you, I can promise you, it's just a matter of saying, okay, this is where I am right now, and how do I wisely use where I am right now?
Interesting. That's good to know. But also wanted to talk, because we're all, parents here. So for our kids investing and kind of building their credit and their financial futures, what is the best way to go about that? So they have, very good like financial hygiene. They grow up with, having these positive sort of financial teachings and things like that. But also, how do we build their, investments and their credit up? I mean, I don't know if this is still advisable, but when I was young, my parents started us with like bank accounts when we were, I guess like 5 or 6 years old, put a little bit of money, and not just like huge amounts of money. I've just consistently sort of added money in to build things until we could start doing investments and things like that. So what is the best way to do that so we can guide our kids?
Okay. All right. So I want to make sure I wrote some things down, because I want to make sure that I don't miss these things. Okay. So the first thing is like, always remember your kids are watching you. I know that growing up, my parents would say, you need save. But my parents were also buying luxury cars like every 3 years. So it was like, you're doing things differently than what you told me to do. And I'm doing what I saw you do, not what I heard you say. And so we have to think about the fact that our children are watching us and that we are modeling sound financial behaviors, but also that we don't want to model in a way that it feels restrictive. And so I've met people who are like, my mom never bought me a new pair of, sneakers growing up. So now every time I get paid, I'm buying a new pair of sneakers. Like, okay, mom, that had a counterproductive effect, because now they're overspending instead of being frugal, which is what you were probably trying to drive home, instead of teaching that there's a balance. There's a balance between addressing what you want and addressing what you need to do, and showing how you straddle that balance. So demonstrating that in day-to-day life, how that operates, talking through things like, hey, yeah, so you want to go on this field trip, but you also want to do this. So this is how we look at balance, and this is how we execute that, or how we implement balance when it comes to our finances, which is really important, because you'll have bills that you have to pay and you have things that you want to do. So the first is ensuring that you're showing them sound financial behaviors, not just telling them sound financial behaviors. The second thing is, when it comes to credit, remember that your credit becomes their credit initially. You're not allowed to have a credit score until you're 18 years of age. So, and a lot of times what parents can do is add their children as an authorized user to one of their credit cards. That means you're going to want to have a credit card that you've had almost perfect payment history, that you've had for, ideally 10 plus years or 5 plus years, that you can add your child on as an authorized user, so that your financial history on that card becomes their financial history. And now they're starting their credit portfolio with a seasoned, well-utilized, responsibly used card. So your behaviors are as important in building their credit. And then, I know that my first credit card, I didn't tell my mom about it. I went to college.
Yes,
same. Wisely enough, I sent the bill to their house. And so my mom got the bill and she was like, oh, you're eating Red Lobster? What did you order? Like, what are you doing? And, but she paid it. My mom ended up, she was like, okay, well, you don't have a job, so I have no idea why you thought it was okay to get a credit card, but we're going to pay this for you. And because they paid that off for me, I ended up having great credit. And so maybe allow them to have a credit card. And like, I think that if my mom would have had a conversation with me up front, I would have been less likely to get into credit card debt versus hiding that card from her. And so I think it is like, understanding that they're going to want their own card, walking them through that process, but 18 is the age that they can actually get one. And then the third thing is let kids use money. Like, I think that I've met parents who like, they don't want their children to work. They don't want children to earn their own money. They don't want them to buy things. They want to give them everything, but then they don't have an understanding of how money truly works, and that money runs out. Like, if you allow them to utilize money and understand it's not infinite, it runs out eventually. You have to be mindful in how you use it. That's a really powerful teaching mechanism. And one of those things could be a custodial account. So you can open a custodial banking account. So they have their own bank account. They can put, Christmas money in, they can put birthday money in, they can put allowance money in, whatever it is, but they have their own custodial account. And then as a parent, you can also be buying them stocks. And so my son, we have a custodial stock account where my goal is to put like $250 in there every week. And I can buy portions of stocks. And so I might not say, okay, we're going to buy all shares of Amazon, but we're putting $250 a week in. Okay. So $1,000 each month is like, we're able to buy like portions of that stock until you eventually have like 3 shares of Amazon in your portfolio and you're 3 years old. And so I would say, you can get custodial accounts. And the great thing about this, if a parent is hesitant to invest on their own, there's time. You have ample time for that stock to perform and everything else, and like mitigate risk and everything, if you're investing in it while they're a young age, and just continue to do that over time. And the last tip I would say is, people think that estate plans are only for the wealthy. But when we think about opening multiple accounts for our children, it's important to like, who's going to be the touch point person if something happens to you? And how do they find out they have access to those accounts? How do they know where that money is? Do you want them to have certain limitations on how they are able to use the money that you leave behind, even if it's a life insurance policy? One of my best friends, her mother passed away when we were 19 years old and didn't put any stipulations on the money. And she was I think she inherited like $380,000 and she didn't have any of it 2 years later, because at 19, what are you going to do if there aren't any restrictions on your money? You're going to think like, and you don't have anyone else who is overseeing how you're utilizing that money. So it's important to think about an estate plan if you're thinking about putting money aside for your kids. That way someone is there to manage it, to make sure that they're using it responsibly.
Okay.
I mean, these are amazing tips. And I think that people who are listening are going to be, oh my gosh, this is something that I obviously have to think about. But I think we need to talk about the fact that so many people, and many of our listeners who've sent in questions, are in debt. A lot of them are in their 30s and they've, got credit card debt and school debt and college and all these different credit cards that are maxed out. And then they're now earning money. So if you've got debt and you're now earning money, what is the best way to get out of debt? Because I know, like, I had a period of my life, I think just in my late 20s, where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm starting to go into debt. And like, how am I going to get out of it when I'm like spending more than I'm making? And then, so what are your tips when people are in debt and they can't see out of it? They feel like they're buried by it.
You have to start small. You really do have to start small when you're in debt. And I think a lot of people look at the larger number instead of looking at the smallest number and tackling that smallest number first. So, okay, you have $75,000 worth of credit card debt, or you have $13,000 worth of credit card debt. Is that all on one credit card, or do you have smaller credit card balances that we can tackle, which is what you call the snowball method? And also stop spending, like do what you need to do. Cut the card up, take it out your wallet. For me, I don't even carry, like, I'm a financial educator who likes things. I do not believe in deprivation as a financial freedom strategy. I buy things that I want. But I also do not take my credit cards with me into stores. Like, it's like, no, they're just not, even now it's a practice where it's like, okay, we don't have them on us. So stop spending, find a way to like, even, I don't recommend closing the card, but if you feel like the only way you will not spend with that card is to close it, then close it. Then absolutely. And then we'll work on your behaviors down the line after you pay this debt off. But then the next thing would be that you should start tackling the smallest amount first. If you have a credit card for $1,000, pay the minimum amount on the other credit cards or whatever it may be, and then put everything else, the minimum and extra towards that $1,000 balance until you pay that off. We're going to focus on that. One of the biggest mistakes that I think a lot of people do when it comes to their finances is they're like trying to put out fires everywhere. They're like, okay, I'm going to pay this off and I'm going to pay this down. I'm going to pay this off and pay this. And they're not really making a concerted effort at one specific debt and paying that off and moving on to the next. So their money is just kind of like, it's like if you have sand, right? And you put sand on like a glass table and you're like smoothing it around all over the table, you're going to have bare spots versus if you just pile all that sand into one area and cover that up and take care of that, then move it to the next area. And so instead of spreading your money around, focus on one debt and then move to the next one. Stop looking at the bigger number, look at the smaller number, chip away at the smaller number. And by chipping away at that smaller number, you chip away at the bigger number. And sometimes you need to make more money. Like I am also of the mindset that sometimes people just don't make enough money to achieve the goals that they need to achieve. So you have to figure out, how am I going to make more money? Like what type of side hustle can I do? What do I have an interest in? How can I better monetize my time? Maybe you can cut back on some things, but I'm also like, yeah, you can cut back on like $600 a year. But if you have $70,000 worth of credit card debt, that $600 is not going to feel like a significant amount. We need to figure out how to turn that $600 into an additional like $1,000 or an additional $1,500 so that can really make a dent. So we have to figure out how you're going to make more money too sometimes.
Yeah, those are great tips. Talking about, because obviously we've been through this crazy time with COVID and like, you know, the shutdown, and a lot of people were not making money and really getting into debt. Some even declared personal bankruptcy, you know, after this time. So after something like a personal bankruptcy, is it possible to reestablish good credit, kind of repair your credit? How long does that take? How long does personal bankruptcy last on your credit score? And is it possible to secure a mortgage after a personal bankruptcy?
Yeah. I mean, you know, we've seen examples of people who've had bankruptcy and went on.
Who would that be?
Who went on to do really, really big things, you know, really big things. So a bankruptcy does not stop you from moving forward and getting back on track financially. Usually it impacts you about 7 to 10 years. And it depends on the type of bankruptcy. And I'm not a bankruptcy attorney, but it depends on the type of bankruptcy. But some of them, like as soon as you get your paperwork and you kind of like finish your filing in court and everything, you can actually start rebuilding your credit. And that might be through a secured card. That might be like Finger Hut is like this Mac catalog ordering company, but it's notorious for allowing people to start to rebuild their credit, even if they've had bankruptcies and everything else. So you would just need to start. I think a credit card is going to be one of the best ways to start to rebuild your credit history. And then just understand you'll get qualified for things. You're just going to pay a premium for them initially until you boost your credit score again. So you can get a car. A mortgage is a stretch. That's a stretch, but you know, within 7 to 10 years, you would be able to qualify for a mortgage again after you've been working at your finances. So you would have to baby step your way out of it. You also want to take that time to figure out, like, how do I even get into this mess in the first place, and how do I avoid going into it? So while I'm waiting for buying my house, which buying a house is not the end all be all. Like me and my husband bought a house last year. Yay. We're happy that we have our house, but there are some benefits that come with not being a homeowner, like not being on the hook if something goes wrong in the house, or being able to pick up and move if your job demands it, or you no longer like the area, or the school system is not working for your kids anymore. So there are some benefits to not being in a home that you can take advantage of while you're renting and getting your finances back together so that you can buy a home when your finances are ready. But it takes generally about 7 to 10 years for you to have that bankruptcy removed from your credit report and for it to kind of disappear, we should say. Like nothing really truly disappears, but for it to not have the same impact as it did initially.
And what if people didn't go as far as bankruptcy, but just COVID really did affect their credit score, right? So they're in the 80s or 70s. So like, even for me, like my credit score was so great, and then it dipped a little bit. So then my question is, how do you raise that? Even like, and how long does it take to raise your credit score?
Yeah. I mean, you can raise your credit score in like 30 days. I remember when I first got it started. So my focus when I first got started with my Fab Finance was to improve my credit score by 130 points. And well, I wanted to improve my credit score because I was like, by the age of 30, I should have all my ish together and I need to have a 700 credit score. So I was working on that and I improved my credit score 130 points in 18 months when I got started. And it was just learning how credit works. Credit is a puzzle. And I was talking to an accountant a few days ago, and he was like, you know, the tax code is really just like a playbook for like incentivizing you to make certain financial decisions that benefit the economy that also have positive tax repercussions for you. And the same thing is for credit. Like credit is really just it's like a puzzle. And if you do certain things at this part of the puzzle and do certain things in that part of the puzzle, you start to see the benefits of it. So understanding like what are the actions that are most beneficial to your credit score. First one is definitely paying on time. That's really heavy. That's 30% or 35%. But then there's also how you're utilizing your credit cards. And so that accounts for 30%. So right now, like paying on time and how you utilize it is 65% of your credit score. That means that if you have a credit card that has $1,000 limit and you have spent $900 on that, you're near maxing it out, and that has negative repercussions for your credit score. So that means that we want to pay that down to 30%. So we don't necessarily have to pay it off for it to boost our credit score, but we need to have it at that 30% mark. So the balance needs to be less than $300. So when I was working on my credit, that's what I did, because remember I said like that, those focused efforts make sense. And so I was just focused on paying everything down or close to 30%. And then I came back and paid everything off, because that allowed me to boost my credit score, which then I was like, okay, my credit score is good. All right, now let's pay this debt off, because I was focused on boosting my credit score. So you just have to understand how it works. There are a few forums I really love. The FICO forum, myfico.com, has a free forum that you can see what people are doing, like what cards they are using to boost their credit, what cards are using to like increase their credit score, what companies are more favorable to people who have lower credit scores versus mid credit scores versus high credit scores, who's giving higher credit limits, because that matters too. If they're giving higher credit limits, that means you have a little more leeway when it comes to how much you can spend before it impacts your utilization. So really just if you want to improve your credit, like geek out on it. Just like read those forums, because it's really actually quite interesting. And then it gets to a point where you're like, you see your credit score drop, you're like, oh, I know what to do. You know, like I don't advise for people to pay someone to fix their credit, because if something happens, you don't know what you did. It's almost like if you pay someone to cook your Thanksgiving meal, which I'm doing, but it's almost like if you pay someone to cook your Thanksgiving meal and then like you didn't cook it, so next Thanksgiving, you don't know what to do because someone else cooked it the last year for you. Versus if you fix your credit yourself or you work on your credit yourself, if anything happens, you're like, oh, okay, this happened. I know what that happened. I know what to do. And now you can use that money that you would have used to pay someone else to put it towards whatever you need to focus on financially.
I have to ask this though, because, this is because I've been with a business manager for so many years. Where do you find your credit score? Because I always thought that if you when they run your credit score, then that's a negative impact on your credit score. So how do you find it? Is there a website where you can watch it drop and raise?
Absolutely. So when you check your credit report yourself, you do not get dinged, because that's called a soft inquiry. A soft inquiry, like I have Credit Karma. I have all those I've Chase, Credit Journey, Capital One's monitoring service. And I check my credit like once a week, like just to make sure everything's on the up and up, and it does not negatively impact your credit score. But it only negatively impacts your credit score is only negatively impacted if you're applying for new debt. So if you are, or applying for a new account of some sort. So if you're applying for a mortgage, if you're applying for a credit card, then, or you're buying a car, they're like, oh, okay, they're shopping for credit, which means they might add to their debt to income ratio, which means let's see how they manage this. Let's see what happens with that. Go ahead and dock their score a little bit. So that's when it negatively impacts your credit score. But there are a lot of sites out there, Credit Karma, like I mentioned. And if you have a credit card or a bank relationship, that bank most likely has a relationship with like some type of credit monitoring software. Just important to keep in mind that that's considered a FICO score. So FICO is the actual company that owns the IP related to calculating credit scores and taking all this financial information and putting out a code or putting out a score. So FICO owns that. And for a long time, you could only get your credit score by going through FICO, or if a lender had an account with FICO. But now all these other companies are like, hey, we've seen what they've done long enough. Let's create our own algorithm. Let's mirror it as much as we can to FICO, and we can send it to consumers because that probably has value to them. They don't just want their credit score when they're buying something. So that's considered a FICO score. Might have some variation between your actual FICO score, but it is still a good base for understanding where you are as far as your credit journey and where you are in the score range. Sometimes it might deviate 15 points or so. And sometimes it's pretty accurate. And it's important to also keep in mind, most people have over 40 different credit scores, because it's not just Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. Mortgage companies have their own algorithm they use, which is your mortgage score. Auto lenders have their own algorithm that they use, where it looks at your previous auto history and weighs that more, and it takes that more into consideration. It doesn't necessarily care as much about medical debt and things like that. So there are like industry specific credit scores as well that you will not have access to until you apply, such as insurance. They run your credit, they want to see, but they're looking at different things than someone who's going to give you a cell phone would, or someone who's going to give you a mortgage would. So just keep that in mind. You have multiple different credit scores. Those FACO scores are the ones provided by your bank or Credit Karma or these other credit monitoring softwares are really helpful in understanding where you are and what range you're falling in.
Wow, fascinating.
I feel like I said a lot. I'm really passionate about
I'm writing it all down. This is the first time in like 120 podcasts. I'm like, okay, my FICO notes.
I'm honored to be your credit expert in 120. Like I was like,
yeah.
We can do this. No, we can do this regularly.
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Yes. So I was really interested in talking about passive income. Just so our listeners know, passive income is not like your 9-to-5 job income that you go to work and you get paid for. Passive income is when your money kind of works for you, and you're creating these income streams that are passive, quite literally. So I know that, within that falls, investments, stocks, brokerage accounts, things like that, but also real estate investments too, like in, investment properties. So can you speak to, us and our listeners about the best way to kind of harness passive income and really make it work for you?
Yeah. So I really also want to set the stage in the understanding that most passive income is active at first. Like you don't just pass your way into an additional extra, couple $1,000s, a couple $100s a month. But the great thing is if you do it right and you set it up with the proper systems or processes, it can become passive. I mean, some of my favorite passive income sources are like a book. I wrote a book 3 years ago when I was pregnant with I just had my son. I was like, I was pregnant with my son. I was like, let's get this book out of here. And I still get royalties each and every month from that book. So it's literally, I monetize my intellectual property, turn that into a book that pays me passively. And I literally don't have to do anything because it's on Amazon. So that's an example where utilizing your IP or your intelligence to create a passive income product. I also have a course that I created on credit that I know someone who teaches like this real estate course, and he licenses out my credit course. I literally taught that course in 2015, and I'm still getting paid from it every single month from licensing. So that's one way to look at it. Is like, do I have an intellectual skill set that I can license out to other people, or that I could create one time and then sell it? Another, when you brought up investing such as in the stock market, it takes a substantial amount of volume for that to truly become passive income. So we're not going to buy like $10,000 worth of stocks and think, okay, now this is passive, because if you're probably going to get some dividends that come from that, but the dividends might be like 10 cents. The dividends might be a couple of dollars. That money is best served as doing what they call a DRIP, which is dividend reinvestment. You just allow that money to go back into more portions of stocks for that company, or purchase more stocks from that company. When we think about making money from investments, like we're talking someone who has like 6 figures worth of investments making money off of that. So if you get a large amount of money and you're like, I just want to put this in an investment so that it can create passive, then cool. But if this is someone who's like, I don't have 6 figures to put aside for that, then we have to look at other strategies. Real estate is one of them. The thing about real estate, is passive-ish. It's passive-ish, meaning, you can get a tenant in there who is very needy and they're calling you every week and asking you to do something related to the property if you don't have a property management company. And then if you get a property management company, they might eat into your profits. And so you might not make as much cash flow. But, it is to an extent, ideally someone would get a great tenant in there. They pay their rent on time. You're making money at the rent when it comes to the rent and the cash flow from the rent. And you're also making money, through potential appreciation of that property. So it is a good investment in that regard. But I think we have to reframe passive. Sometimes people want passive to be, I don't ever have to lift a finger. And sometimes passive might be, I only have to maintain it every couple of months or so versus me having to work on it every single day. So real estate is another example of passive income, but I really like the intellectual property model. And then you could create a store online. I know some people who have done this, they do drop shipping. Because creating a store like on Etsy is not passive because you're making things, you're selling them. That's not passive. But if you do something with like drop shipping, where the factory or the warehouse is located in Florida and you live in California, and people go to the website and buy things and you never have to touch the product and it ships out to them and you're making money off of it, that's a form of passive income. But you have to think about who's marketing that company, who's ensuring that it's getting traffic. What I've seen some people do is like they literally will create a website or they'll create an online store and they will optimize it for SEO purposes. Wherein if someone goes looking for that, it's going to show up or something related to that product, it's going to show up in the Google search engine results. People are going to go read and they're like, oh, I actually need this product. And they check out and buy it. And so now they've used search engine optimization to create a passive website that does drop shipping. That's a way that you can make passive income in that area. But it takes work on the front end. Or affiliates. Affiliates is another thing. I've met a man who sold his website for $4 million. And he sold it because he had a lot of affiliate links on there. So he optimized it for SEO. People would come and learn about refinancing a car. And then he have an affiliate link where it takes people to where they can refinance their car. And he might get a kickback of $150 per person who refinances their car. So now he hasn't been involved in the process at all, other than when he initially set the website up.
Oh my
God.
gosh.
Those are examples. And then he was able to sell the website for $4 million because it brings in so much passive revenue. So those are things that take time initially. Passive income is going to be active at first, but then you set things and you do it well. You might come in and do a few minor tweaks and they work like clockwork.
Wow. Please be our financial advisors. I'm like, when can I speak to you every day? I'm like obsessed with learning about money. I've always been very money driven, but not because I want all these Gucci bags and houses, but I just love the process. My dad, started from nothing and we immigrated from South Africa to Australia and they had to start again. He had a business in South Africa, couldn't take any money out of the country. So I watched my dad come from like nothing and build this multi-million-dollar business like with his hand, with his hands pretty much. Like he did marketing. I'd see him every day go out and fight for his dreams. So I've always been obsessed with, I've always thought that money can be made. I've always had a really good relationship with money. It's always come in and gone out and come in and gone out. There's been some times where I think I could have been better with my money, but now I'm at this point where it's like fascinates me. Right. So I'm like, okay, so let's talk about like stocks. Let's talk about cryptocurrency. Let's talk about all those different things that like I'm super into, but I'm like an idiot when it comes to it. Like I invested in cryptocurrency, like the minuscule amount. And I thought to myself, well, I'll just watch it. And if it starts to raise and I'll be like, okay, well, that was a good investment. I'll just invest 20 times more than I already invested because it went up a little bit. So I was like playing with like little tiny increments, but I'm like, I want to know about stocks. I want to know about cryptocurrency and also your opinion if cryptocurrency is worth it. But like, where do you even start? Like I have the book, like Stocks for Dummies, and I'm still confused. So like, how do you start?
Well, and also shout out to your dad. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur for 6 years and I have such a soft space in my heart for entrepreneurs because we literally make it our responsibility to create solutions to other people's problems. And we make really good things. Some of us make really good money doing it. So, I think that, and I'm also really big on entrepreneurship and people investing in their businesses and their dreams, because I know hands down, there was no way I was going to make $1 million working for someone else. It just, it just didn't make sense. Like, why would you pay me that? But I was able to make it working for myself. So I'm really, really big on entrepreneurship. And as far as cryptocurrency, I think that it has a lot of promise. I think that once companies and governments figure out how to use it and understand it better, they will get on the wagon and they'll use it more. Do I completely understand it? No, but I do put I put discretion. I call it my play money in it. So like, it's not money that I have to use. Like, it's not anything that comes out of my other primary investments or money that is going to be used towards like my son's education or anything like that. But it's like, okay, got a couple of extra $100 here. Let's buy some Shiba Inu and see what it does. Like, all right, let's
like, what are these names?
Like, let's do it. And a lot of times I learn, I have a few people who I kind of trust and talk to, but there are like, YouTube videos. There's so much education online. There's Reddit threads. And a lot of times I'll just sit in my bed and just read Reddit threads and just see what people are saying. And some of these Reddit threads, I think Wall Street Bets I don't know if they're still around, but like NFTs is something else I'm interested in. Like, how does this really work? So just really familiarizing myself with what's going on. I think that one of the biggest mistakes that I probably made was not buying Bitcoin when it was like $9,000 and thinking it's gonna bust. And then I was telling my husband that literally last night. I was like, dude, I really should have bought some Bitcoin when it was $9,000. But now I'm just buying portions of it. I chip away at it. And that's the great thing about crypto is you can chip away and own portions of coins. And so I just put money towards it. But again, that's my play money. So if anybody wants to learn about stocks, I would say, the first place would be like, go to reputable like YouTube channels, go to reputable companies, Fidelity, Robinhood, they all have education around stocks and growing in that. And some of it just comes from doing. Some of it really just comes from doing and saying like, oh, okay, that's how it works. Like say, all right, I'm going to put $100 or I'm going to buy these 2 shares and I'm going to wait for earnings reports to come out and see what happens. And like, oh, okay, that's how it works. I don't feel like you really understand stocks until you start playing with them. And then it hits. And understand what type of investor you want to be. You don't have to be versed on the stock market if you want to. I mean, you should be knowledgeable, but you don't have to be an expert if you want to be a buy and hold person. Because if you're buying and holding, you're just buying it and seeing what happens. And you're like, okay, in 10, 20 years, I'm going to cash this out. You might want to be mindful of what companies have promised, but you don't need to know, like, okay, this is how it's swinging on a weekly basis. And now I'm taking December off to learn how to trade because I did realize that investing was one of my blind spots that I really want to focus on. And I've met a lot of my friends that are making a lot of money in trading. And I was like, if I decide that I don't want to talk to people ever again, but I still want to make money, I want to be able to do that. And so I'm learning how to trade because one of my friends, I was just talking to him yesterday, he made like $300,000 in 3 weeks trading.
Wow.
So I'm like, and legitimately, like, and not in like scammy bot stuff that we see on Instagram. It's like legit learning. So I was like, this is worth me learning how to do. But you don't have to do that if you don't want to. But if you do, like, learn how it works, like really focus and then practice. A lot of these sites have like practice accounts where it's not your money. And you can just, it's like simulations. So it's simulating with their money. Like, I think this is a good, we call it play. So I think this is a good play. Let me try it out and see how it does. And that starts to build your confidence too, because remember I said, we don't learn from deprivation. We don't learn from shame. We learn from empowerment. So now you're empowering yourself to apply the knowledge that you're learning to see how it works. And you become more confident and you start becoming more confident using your real money.
That's a good point. Also wanted to ask you about these apps, like these money apps, specifically Digit, Acorn, that sort of say they're taking away money for you, or they're taking money and investing it for you. What are your thoughts on those particular apps? And
I love
others that you like. You do, okay?
Yeah, I love Digit. I actually bought my my wedding dress with Digit back when I first got started. Life was so different when I first got started. But when I first got started, I was using Digit and I think I had like $900 stocked away. Like they had just been putting money away for me. And I ended up buying a wedding dress with that money. And so the way they work, they do have a special algorithm for people who are like, what is Digit? Digit is a program that can connect to your primary checking account or whatever checking account you want it to. And then what it does is it automatically saves small amounts of money for you based on looking at your spending behaviors, because they're probably going to spend this money anyway. So let's take it, but it's not going to be a necessity. Most likely it's going to be like that Target run or whatever. So let's go ahead and put small amounts of this away for them and save it in a rainy day fund. But we also have been analyzing their spending behaviors. So we know that on the first of the month, they pay their mortgage, or between the first and the 10th, they're going to have a large deduction come out for their mortgage. And that's when they pay the bulk of their bills. We're not going to take any money out during that time. We're going to see what's left over after that. And then we might put a small amount of that over and another little rainy day fund for them. And the great thing about Digit, Acorn, a lot of them have policies where they say, we trust our algorithms so much that we will reimburse you any overdraft fees that you would incur as a result of us taking money out your account. So they do provide that protection. And I mean, granted, people are going to say, well, you're a financial educator, you have a handle on your money. But early on, when I was still getting a handle on my money, I used Digit and I never had any issues with it overdrafting. So if you're someone who says, I know I need to be saving more and I'm not doing it, set up that account, like set up a Digit, set up an Acorn, now, granted, it's not going to be your emergency fund where it's not going to replace that, or maybe it take a couple of years to replace that. You should still be saving actively in a separate checking account. And then you should also use that as a way to supplement the savings that you have, because maybe, like I actually was thinking today, I was like, I haven't checked my Digit in a while, but because I'm going to start trading, there's probably money in my Digit that I could use for trading. And I'll just put that in my trading account and just use that to trade with. So it's like,
you do have access to the account, right? It's not like they take the money away and it's like locked up there and you can't take it for a while.
Yeah. You can literally type in like, I want, how much money is my,
give my money back.
Yeah. You can literally say, what's my balance? Okay. Send me 500 of that. And they'll be like, cool. $500 will arrive in your account, in 2 to 3 days. Like, so it's, you get your money. You can get your money when you need it.
Can you because I've heard from other financial advisors online, like can you save if you have debt, or should you get out of debt before you start saving?
So I'm curious, what have you heard people say? Have you heard people say?
I've heard people say, do not say, like your priority is to get out of debt because you don't really have savings if you're still in debt.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So this sounds like a certain someone who I don't agree with their financial. What
does their name rhyme with?
Yeah.
Pansy. I don't believe in that, because here's the thing. If we focus solely on paying off debt, the next time an emergency happens and we don't have any savings, our only option is to create more debt. And so I strongly believe that when you create a savings, you allow yourself to be your own bank account, and that you should still work on paying down your debt, but you should prioritize your savings because life is going to happen. So whether that is putting aside, what you can do is create a floor where it's like, you can create a floor and be like, after I save $2,500, then I'll begin aggressively saving again. But I think that you should have a certain amount that you want in your savings account before you aggressively pay down debt, because we're just going to end up in square one. Like once you pay a debt, or say you pay, MasterCard, whatever MasterCard you have, say you pay a debt off and like you owe them $2,500, you pay $2,500. Something happens, you get like, I don't know, like, something happens to your roof on your house, right? And you need to repair that. You don't have $2,500 in your savings account because you gave it to MasterCard, and MasterCard's not going to say, oh, that happened. Here, let's give you your money back so you can pay that. They're going to be like, okay, well, you can create debt and pay interest on this money, and then we'll start over again. Welcome back. So I highly recommend that people build a certain amount of money in their savings, aggressively save, and then switch gears to aggressively eliminating debt once they have a whatever the amount they're comfortable with in their savings account.
Is it possible? Because I know this was kind of before, I've not tried it myself, but I actually want to. You could actually negotiate with credit card companies to lower your interest rates on your credit card. So like you're not paying like 23% interest, let's say, on your, credit cards. Is there a way to still do that where you can negotiate with the actual credit card companies?
Yeah, so that is a thing. You can
Okay.
do that. There are a few things that, so there is a script, Ramit Sethi, his book is I Will Teach You to Be Rich. He has the script on his website, and it's, it's a pretty solid script. The thing is that you want to make sure that you have a good standing with that company, like, because it gives you more room for negotiation. If you are a problem borrower and you don't pay on time as is, then they're going to be like, no, we're not doing you any favors. Versus if you're someone like, hey, I had questionable credit when I first established my relationship with you. I've demonstrated that I am a solid borrower. I pay my credit card on time every month. I keep my limits within reason. This, now that my life has changed and my spending behaviors has changed, I do not think that this interest rate reflects where I am financially. And I would like to find out about if I can negotiate it down or if there's a more competitive interest rate. Because now that my credit has improved, I have other options with other lenders. And I'm considering closing this card for something else that is more competitive of an interest rate that reflects where I am right now in my finances. So that's, that's kind of how you flow that conversation, but you want to make sure that you've had positive payment history with them, because otherwise it's gonna be like, what? Okay, where are you going?
Yeah,
but
like,
you
go
said
on, go on.
No, you're gonna pay this interest rate because who wants you? So you have to look at it as like, how do I make myself as more competitive so that other creditors or other lenders want my business? And another thing, that there are few other things you can negotiate. Sometimes if you know, post-pandemic or during the pandemic, quite a few people had financial constraints, or they saw a significant loss of income. Sometimes you can contact them and they'll waive the interest for a certain amount of months. That happened to me when I changed my job, when I was still working for nonprofits. I ended up going to a new job and I called my creditor, and I think I was just asking some questions. And then I let them know that I was, I got a new job, and most of the time you're in that time frame where it's like you don't get a paycheck because you got to wait to get one and in the can before you can get a paycheck. And they're like, oh, okay, well, that would definitely affect your income. Here, we'll waive the interest for the next 2 months. And so they can do things like that. And also, one thing that I had to do last year was I try to keep all my credit card balances to a zero. I keep a zero balance on my credit cards. Sometimes I use other ones just because it makes sense or points, but I have forgotten to pay the annual fee. I completely forgot because there's no balance. There's nothing for me to pay. Forgot to pay the annual fee. Moved across country from California to Georgia, and I missed the mail, and I ended up getting a 30-day late for an annual fee. So they charged me a 30-day late. This is a card I previously had perfect payment history on. When it hit my credit report, it dropped my credit score by 80 points, that 30-day late.
Oh my God.
And it was literally because of annual fee. I was livid. I ended up writing the company. I wrote their executive office and I pleaded my case. I was like, I've had this card for 7 years. I've had perfect payment history. I haven't ever had a 30-day late. Could you please make an exception, because these things were going on in my life during that time. And they made an exception. They removed the 30-day late, and my credit score is back to its glory. So you can reach out to them often if it's a one-time thing and you have a good relationship with them.
What is a
You have to
competitive?
know, though,
What's
too,
a
right?
you do, and
Yeah.
what's a competitive interest rate right now for credit cards? Like, what's like the what do you want to shoot for?
I mean, so you can do introductory rates, which are 0%. But usually, though, if you find a 0% card, that's usually going to be an introductory offer where it'll be for like maybe 12 months. I've seen them as long as 24 months, but it's not for the life of the card oftentimes, because credit card companies want to make money too, and they make money off of interest. So a competitive, I would say around 13. It's going to be, I feel like I might have seen 8 is like the lowest I've seen, but on average, even for someone with great credit, you're going to be looking at between the 8 and 15 range. So that's where it just benefits you to just pay things off if you don't want to pay interest.
That makes me so mad. I had a business manager and like amazing credit, always in the 7s. And my credit, like my repayment was like 22%. My interest.
It depends on the card. Some
Like,
cards
what?
and some cards have higher interest rates. Like I found that reward cards are going to have highest interest rates because they have to offset the rewards. Like they gotta like, they're not gonna give you rewards and give you competitive interest rates in perpetuity. Like they're like, okay, we have to make money somehow. So a lot of times what they do is they charge higher interest rates because that helps them pay for the rewards that they have access to or offer that program to you. So that isn't necessarily going to be, you know, based on what your credit is. It's kind of like the premium you pay to have that card, and you just know how to use it. You charge, get your points, and pay the card off before the interest rate even hits. So for those cards, even store cards have notoriously high interest rates. So what I'll do, like my son, you know, I only had a Macy's store card until I had a child. And then I had a child and I had like all the baby clothes store cards. And so, but what I would do is, because they grow so fast, right? It's like every season I'm buying him clothes. And so there are perks to having a store card. So what I'll do is I'll go in, I use a store card, 3 days later, I'll go pay it off. Like before any interest hits, I'll just go ahead and pay the bill off. And so you can use it that way so you can kind of skate the interest rate and the interest charges.
I feel like I could talk to you for another like 2 hours, but I know we have to go. So I'm going to ask one last question. Roxy will ask one last question and then we'll let you go. But so I remember when I first got to 30, and tell me if this is a story that isn't even possible. There was this girl who was a friend of mine, and she got into some really bad credit card debt, and they closed her credit cards down. I remember she came over, we were drinking wine. She was like hysterical. And she called, I remember her saying this. And again, I don't know if this is true because she's not really my friend anymore. And we just turned 30. She said that she'd called the credit cards and so I think that it was like $50,000 worth of debt, and they shut it down, and she negotiated with them and she paid $20,000 and they cleared her credit cards. Wow. Is that possible? Then why wouldn't everyone do that? Or does it really impact your credit for 7 years like bankruptcy? Like, how does that work?
Okay, so you can do that. That is negotiation.
You can do that. Okay, so she wasn't lying to me over wine.
She wasn't lying. She wasn't lying. But what happens is credit card companies are not going to negotiate with you while things are going good. They're like, no, just keep doing what you're doing. Give us the money you owe us. No, pay the balance. You have the means. What usually happens is when you have defaulted to the point where they close the account, is they start to lose hope. And they're like, okay, how can we get our money from you? Like by any means possible. And then they get desperate and they're like, okay, all right, $20,000 is better than nothing. And right now we have nothing from you. So if it takes us negotiating this to get some of this money back, we'll do it. So we can so it's not completely written off. So that's what she was able to do, is that they got to a point where they're like, we know we're not going to get 50,000 from you. So what can we get from you? The thing about getting to that point though, is they've already closed the account and it's already negatively affect her credit report. So a lot of times credit is about our relationship to debt, and her paying that off is not going to boost her credit score because it's no longer being factored into her credit score. It's a closed debt. It's no longer, but now what it is, it's like, she's not going to, they won't come after her to garnish her wages. She's not going to get those phone calls anymore. If she does apply for a mortgage, at least the account will say paid for less than the amount owed. Sometimes what people are able to do in those negotiations is they can do what you call a pay for delete, where they say, okay, you sent this to collections, which collections is one of the worst things that can happen to your credit report. It's kind of like once a collection item hits, the only way for it to improve your credit report or your credit report to improve is just to have that removed. So what she could do is do a pay for delete and say, okay, I owe you $20,000. I'll pay you your $20,000 if you remove that negative debt from my credit report. It's up to them if they want to do it or not. Some creditors will do it. Some creditors will say they can't. You pay it and you see the debt falls off in a year. So it just depends. That's where the My FICO forums come in hand, or these online forums, because chances are other people have dealt with debt with these companies, and you can kind of see how successful people have been in getting pay for deletes with those certain companies, or if they eventually removed it, or even how flexible they are in negotiating for less than the amount owed. So it is possible, but they usually will not negotiate with you until you are in severe or significant default. So by that time, the damage has been done. And now you're just kind of playing offense to make sure that they don't do anything else to negatively impact you.
Would she have been able to improve her credit card score if she had paid it for less than it was? If she paid $25,000 on $50,000, could she over time still increase her credit? Or is that
if they wouldn't have closed it? If they wouldn't have closed it, or if they
if they closed it, like she'd said, $50,000, and then they paid $25,000. what would that do to the credit card score?
It won't affect it because it's a closed debt. The only debts that can boost your credit report or your credit score are the open credit cards or your open accounts. So a closed, like behaviors on a closed account, unless it's removed, the only way that I can positively impact you is removing it. Otherwise, no matter what you do after it's closed, it's not going to help your score.
Oh, it's not going to help your score. Okay.
Yeah, because it has to be an open. It takes active credit to build credit. So once they close it, it's a dead in the water. It's dead. Yeah. So it's like whatever you do is whatever you do. Like now you're doing this for you, but you're not doing this for your credit score unless they will have agreed to remove it. And now by removing that collection item, that can boost your credit score.
So what is, okay, for our listeners that are listening out there, perhaps they have bad credit. They haven't been saving as much as they wanted to, they've got kids and they're trying to figure that whole thing out. What are like some practical tips that they can do today to start improving their credit, to building their financial future? What is like something tangible, like they could actually like physically do today?
Yeah. I would say write out all of your credit card balances and write out all the limits. And then look at, okay, what equals 30% of this limit? So if I have a credit card of $2,000 and right now I have $1,100 charged on it. The ideal, so write 3 columns, right? 3 columns, put balance, limit, target utilization. Target utilization is going to be 30% times whatever your limit is. So on a $2,000 card, your target utilization is $600. If you have $1,100 charged on that card, your goal is to pay it down to get to that $600. So then now you're at that 30% where it starts to positively impact your credit score. So I would say list out all of your debts and start chipping away at them like that. And then after you get them down, I would say start with the smallest one first, because you might have one like, oh, I just need to pay like $200 to get this down. Like, okay, let's do this. Let's get this down to 30% onto the next one. So start with the smallest amount with that. And then once we get them down to 30%, let's then focus on, okay, let's start paying off the smallest debt now. Let's pay off the next smallest debt. Let's pay off the next smallest debt. So create a plan by looking at like what you need to do with those cards. But also I would say when it comes to like your financial picture, understand if credit is what you should be focusing on right now, because a lot of people focus on credit because it's our adult GPA. Like how else do we know if we're doing right with money if we like don't have a solid credit score? But sometimes there are other things that are more important, especially if you're not going to be making a credit-based decision. Credit might not be a factor if you own your car, own your home, and like don't plan to make any major buying decisions in the near future. Maybe you should be focused on building your savings instead so that you can maintain those things. I would say you focus on credit when you're trying to buy something or when you're preparing to buy something. But otherwise, should we focus on investing? Like, okay, I have savings, my credit's good, but what does my future look like? Am I growing my money and allowing it to work for me? Or do I need to focus on a side hustle and finding another way to significantly increase my income? Or do I just need to focus on living within a budget and creating some boundaries around my money? Like, what should I be focusing on now to get me to the next step? And then what should my next step be? And then like, how do I build on those steps?
Okay. Cameron, we got homework. We've got homework.
Can we please come back here, please? Because I have like so much more to ask. Please come back.
So much.
I'm gonna DM. So be waiting for my DM that says, please, can we work together? You don't have to respond, but just know that I will DM that.
And I don't even, how I work with clients now, I don't do one-on-ones anymore because I felt it was incredibly selfish for me to do one-on-ones because I wasn't able to impact as many people as I wanted to. And so we do have a boot camp that we offer at Fab Finance. It's closed for this year, but we will be offering it again in the top of the new year. And that I'm in the trenches with the people in the boot camp. It's like a one-to-many model. So that's the best way to work with me. But I know a lot of awesome people that I recommend people to who do work with individuals one-on-one. So
yeah, I think I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, like now what? Like, how do we invest? Like, and I just don't know the next steps. So
yeah,
I think sometimes it's just personal.
And I think that, and like, I know we've been talking a lot, but I would also say, understand that like one person is not going to play the entire position of your financial team. So like, you had a business manager. Your business manager might be good at negotiating contracts and like business related things, but maybe their strength is not investing. And that's where it comes into getting a financial advisor or someone who can advise on investments and help you plan for your future, or a certified financial professional, a CFP or someone like that, who they solely focus on it. They don't negotiate, but they help you manage your money and help you grow your money. Or maybe you need an accountant or someone to help you manage your tax liability. So like my financial team is comprised of, I have a manager, I have a financial advisor, and I have an accountant, and I'm a financial educator, guys. And I have those people. So that goes to say, like, sometimes it's unrealistic to expect one person to play all of these positions. And as you get to those bridges, bring in different people who are qualified in those areas and do those things well. Because you want someone who does those things well. My agent should not do my taxes. Like, you're good at getting me more money. But now let's get this other person to manage how we are utilizing that money and how much we have to pay in taxes and like our cash flow for the business. So just giving people permission to have multiple people and not feeling like one person has to be their end all be all.
As they say, teamwork makes the dream work, right?
Like you and I, Roxy. Teamwork.
Peanut butter and jelly.
Can I be the jelly and sweet?
I'll get that. I'll be the peanut butter, sticky and crunchy.
Thank you so much, Tonya. I am so much food for thought. And so people can find you on, obviously go to your Instagram, my Fab Finance.
That is correct. Yeah. My Fab Finance, we're really active over there. I do Finance Fridays every Friday where I get on and ask questions. We also have our Fab Family, which is our family that we created to support people who are on a financial journey and they feel like they can't talk to other people about it. They're just kind of like, hey, like, I don't know, like no one else is focused on this. How do I talk to other people who are focused on that? So that is, we have our Fab Family. That is our first link in our Instagram bio for My Fab Finance, to make it easy for people to find because you don't remember URLs. And my personal, Tonya, Tonya .Rapley, because I've been teaching financial education since 2013, which is crazy. We're going on 9 years. And so with that, I have my personal brand. I talk about like the businesses I own and how I operate 3 businesses and am a mom. And this year was my first $1 million year as an entrepreneur. So what was the work that it took to go into that, and my team and behind the scenes. So if anyone's ever interested in that stuff, they can follow me at Tonya.Rapley.
Yes. We like,
we're your biggest fans now.
Exactly.
I'm like, is that you? Is that you, Roxy?
We'll both be here and be like, hey.
I love it.
Thank you so much, guys. And please don't forget to rate, subscribe, and comment. We are Women on Top Official on Instagram.
And Women on Top Podcast on Facebook. And we have a Women on Top group on Clubhouse too. And like Timon said, don't forget to rate,
subscribe,
and comments.
I am Tammin Sursock.
And I am Roxy Manning.
And we are Women on Make It a Money Talk.